Our next guest was president of his university LGBTI community group, who went into a corporate career, but during COVID had to reflect and find out who he was truly as a person, and left his corporate career to follow his true passion of being an artist and getting reconnected with his LGBTI community once again. Paul Hughes, welcome to LGBTI Conversations.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Now, pretty exciting time at the moment with World Pride happening. Tell us a little bit, in the 90s, you actually are president of your university LGBTI group.
Gosh, yeah, that's gone back a long time. Yeah, so I was a student in the very early 90s, and as a young queer person, it was a very different time back then because the UK in the early 90s, any kind of representation of queer culture or gayness was very much still controlled by state media. It was still Section 28 was in place. So it was a very different time in terms of representation and visibility. So definitely back then it was something that was very important to me to be out and visible.
And during that time that you grew up in Scotland?
I'm from Scotland, from Glasgow, and like all good Scottish boys, went to my local university, so I studied at Glasgow University.
And you were saying Section 28, so what did that actually entail?
It's a piece of legislation introduced by Margaret Thatcher and the Conservatives, and basically it prevented any kind of discussion or representation of homosexuality or same-sex relationships within education. Teachers weren't allowed to discuss it, and it included not being able to protect young people from bullying and harassment in schools. And this kind of expanded into the media in terms of representations of gay people, queer people. It was a very controlled representation of what the powers that be wanted to see in terms of a gay lifestyle.
So you guys weren't able to express yourselves within the university campus. So how would being the president of an LGBTI group been seen by the powers to be during that time?
I think certainly within the university campus, it was extremely the campus. This was back when the age of consent was still 21. So being out and being the president of the LGBT, as it was called then, society, I was still essentially breaking the law if I was to have sex, because at that point still wasn't 21.
And were the members of the group, were they openly gay, lesbian, bi, or was it more or less kind of underground?
People were definitely out and open, and I would definitely say that the university was an environment I don't think I would have developed and got involved in gay life and queer life as readily had I not gone to university.
Was that your first encounter with that kind of community?
Yeah, I always knew that I was queer. As a young child, I knew that I was different. It took a while to work out that also meant I was gay. And I see them a little bit, for me personally, they're a little bit different. So yeah, I very much felt like going to university would be that opportunity.
What else was going on in the country during that time within the LGBTI community, if you could paint a bit of a picture?
I mean, it was the early 90s, so we were still recovering from the panic and misinformation campaign about HIV and AIDS. Gay men in particular, gay men and intravenous drug users were still being blamed for, the AIDS pandemic. So definitely there was a lot of fear around sex. There was a lot of fear around what type of sex you could and couldn't have. There was fewer choices, but in a way that was a good thing because it meant that the bars that you did go to were a lot more of a community, a much broader representation of the queer community than you get maybe today outside of important events like Pride or Fair Day.
You find there was a lot of places within the community that you could go, like bars and social areas?
Not a lot, but there was certainly, good places and safe places to go. And being few and far between, they were always popular and busy.
Well, one thing the LGBTI plus community knows how to do is have a good time.
Absolutely.
Now, as you left university, you moved more into your corporate life?
Yeah. I would say that at university, I was definitely a bit of a handful. I was a mouthy queer kid. But when I started my career, as you start to progress in your career, you realise more and more that it's important, for want of a better word, to represent the brand or the business that you work for and represent its values. So you do, to a certain extent, assimilate. I worked for a great company. It was very progressive. It wasn't like I had to hide, but certainly I started to develop a more customer-friendly persona at work.
And during that time, I suppose as well, being LGBT would have almost been a disadvantage in some way, although companies wouldn't say it to your face. If you wanted to grow your career, as you were saying before, simulation being like everyone else was probably the best way to go.
Absolutely, yeah. To be able to get into the inner circle, and by that I mean into like senior team, you need to fit in. You know, human relationships are probably the most important thing that we're responsible for at work. So you do adapt and you do change. You know, I was happy to adapt and to change because for me, developing strong bonds with my team was really important and I worked with great people. But I certainly, by the end, realised that I kind of maybe lost a little bit of who I was, maybe had lost a bit of authenticity.
You did find that you kind of lost your community moving around with more heterosexual people and falling into that groove.
Yeah, I think I worked internationally, so I moved around country to country a lot. And, you know, I think companies do that so that you have no friends, no family, and nobody, you know, so you just work 60 hours a week, mean that work became the most important thing and almost what defined who I was as a person.
It's funny you say that. Moving forward with everyone in their careers, they do almost become their job. And especially in corporate life, you do kind of lose a little bit of yourself. And as you were saying, you lose who you are as a person.
Yeah, I think it's always about balance, isn't it? And I think, you know, certainly what's happened in the last few years, I think it's given everybody food for thought, time to reflect and really think about, do you have the right balance? And are you the person that you tell yourself you are? Are you focusing on the things that are truly important to you?
And that takes me to the next question. In 2019, COVID happened. Obviously, everyone's lives changed, no matter what you were doing as a career, whether you started working from home, whether your job disappeared, totally. What was going through your mind when COVID happened in 2019?
Firstly, I moved here just at the end of 2018 from Hong Kong. When the first lockdown happened, I think my first thought was, thank goodness I'm in Australia and not in Hong Kong. Obviously, I think we all thought it was going to be a couple of weeks. Turns out not to be the case. It was very challenging for me, just from the point of view of moving to a new country, being on a bridging visa. The UK government wouldn't take responsibility. The Hong Kong government wouldn't take responsibility. And obviously being on a bridging visa, it wasn't the responsibility of Australia. So fortunately, I'd had savings, and I think without that, it would have probably been a lot more challenging. It was just in a foreign country with no job and no kind of obvious means of support. I think it was the first time in my life that I really had to think, oh gosh, what am I going to do here? This is new territory. In terms of actually the lockdown itself, I have to say I'm a bit of an introvert. I'm great with my own company, so I quite enjoyed having a legitimate excuse not to speak to people. But yeah, I mean, it was more just the unknown at the beginning was really challenging.
Yeah, I think for a lot of introverts, we're all fine. It was the extroverts out there in the world that started to climb the walls pretty fast and start screaming from the rooftop, we want out of here.
Yeah, I'm quite happy in my own company. So for me, it was that part of it actually was quite pleasurable because I managed to do a lot of things I'd promised myself I would do. But to go from working a 60-hour week, as I was doing before I left Hong Kong, to having nothing to do, that was a real shock to the system.
And I suppose too, your network of friends were non-existent in a new country as well. And it wasn't the time to make new contacts during COVID either.
Fortunately, I've got a few very good close friends, but no, you're absolutely right. In terms of your first few years in a new country, establishing yourself, making contacts, it was very limited. And certainly now, as I'm trying to establish myself in a new career with a new focus, I'm more aware that I didn't have that opportunity in the first few years to make connections.
Like with COVID, as I was saying before, everything slowed right down. And also thinking about who you are as a person and where you fit in the community or what lifestyle you gave up for corporate life. Tell us a bit about that.
I worked for a fashion brand. I had a great career. It was a fantastic company and it allowed me to work all over the world, and I'm very grateful for that. To be able to work at that level, it does mean that you dedicate yourself 100% to the job. The job comes first, everything else is secondary. When I left Hong Kong and I left that job, really just months before COVID happened, being an expat and moving from country to country, I became more and more disconnected from what was going on, largely because, so for example, I didn't have a vote. I've not voted for 15 years. Living in, foreign countries, you become less inclined to follow the news. I guess, if I'm being perfectly honest with myself, I was quite shocked and kind of disgusted with myself when I went into lockdown, because I realised that so many kind of monumentous things had happened, and my understanding or my involvement in it had been from the sidelines, and I felt that I was complacent and possibly a little bit ignorant. And I'm, talking specifically things like Black Lives Matter, Me Too, developments within, legislation in the US around the queer community. And this is a real kind of aha moment for me, because I always prided myself in being, somebody who stood up for what I believed, somebody who lived my values. And I had to be, I had to do a lot of reflection and really think, are you the person you tell yourself you are? And while I think at my core I was, I definitely knew that there was some work to do, firstly on educating myself, and secondly on actually deciding how I was going to navigate the world's new landscape and what point of view I wanted to have. Deciding that I didn't want to continue to pursue a senior role in my chosen career, it was really challenging. There's a lot of shame involved in making that decision, because when you build your whole identity around your career and what you do, as soon as you take that away, then you have to do a lot of work in terms of, well, who am I? What do I represent? What do I stand for? And I think at my heart, I always wanted to re-explore being an artist. And, lockdown, for all the good and all the bad, I'm very grateful that it actually afforded me the opportunity to start to explore that and to start to learn about myself again.
So how long do you think, from when you were at university as president of the LGBTI group, then going into corporate life and then coming back out the other side, how long do you think that was time-wise?
Oh gosh, we're talking like 25, almost 30 years.
Wow. So a lot had changed in the landscape during that time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, when I went to university, we're talking about, this was pre-mobile phones. There was no social media. We're talking about, you would, if you wanted to call someone, you would use a public payphone. You would make an arrangement on a Tuesday to meet your friend on a Saturday at 6 o'clock, and you would turn up at 6 o'clock knowing that they would be there because you made that arrangement on the Tuesday. So it was a very different world.
Well, all the achievements that had come to be during that 25 years in the LGBTI community was just as huge as well.
Oh, absolutely. Don't get me wrong, I've always been out, and I've always been very proud of who I am. If I think about who I was 25 years ago, I worked as a buddy for an HIV charity. I worked as a counsellor. I was involved in the university society. To then being in lockdown and thinking, where do you actually, give back or add value or, share a bit of yourself? You don't. That's what I mean about becoming a more authentic version of yourself. Actually facing up to the things that you're not really doing, that you tell yourself you're doing, but actually you're not, and deciding to do something about it.
And you did decide to do something about it, as you were saying that you wanted to pursue your artist side, and you did start that process. So how was that?
The private, on my own painting side of it is amazing. The presenting it to other people, talking about it, using the term I am an artist, that's been really challenging. Definitely, some imposter syndrome, definitely some fear. But I'm getting past that now, and I have my first public exhibition as part of World Pride. I'm very happy and grateful to be on the programme for Pride Amplified. So yeah, it's happening. It's official. I am coming out as an artist, for want of a better word.
So it's not too far of a leap having a career within the fashion industry to move over to another creative, which is being an artist.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. I think I say that I would never describe myself as an artist. Friends and family say that you've always been an artist. I think I've always been creative, but I've never pursued it as this is my career, this is my job, this is my contribution. And I'm extremely glad that I'm now doing it. I think lots of us talk about, wouldn't it be nice to career change? Wouldn't it be nice to, I'm sure everybody's got that pipe dream or that on their bucket list, something they wish they'd done. And certainly doing this was on that list. I guess if you asked me that 5 years ago, I'd say it's a pipe dream. It's never going to happen. Lockdown and the pandemic, that afforded me the opportunity to make it happen. And I'm very grateful. and a little bit scared.
A wise person once told me that if you're not nervous or scared, you're doing it wrong.
Thank you. I remember that the night of the opening.
Now, tell us about the process of your paintings.
So I love all types of art, but for me personally, I'm particularly interested in art that has a story behind it, or there's kind of a point of view to it. So that's the type of work I like to produce. So I work in acrylic and mixed media. The term for me is that I'm an appropriation artist. So I'll take imagery or familiar things and then represent them in a slightly different way. I work in building up layers. So the paintings that I do have got several layers. I guess the way to describe it is, if you're walking down the street and there's like billboard posters that have been put on the wall and there's graffiti, there's layers of posters that you can't quite see, but you know they're underneath there. And it's almost like there's stuff going on, or there's information there that you can't quite access, but you know it's there. That's kind of what I aim to achieve with my work. And my work for this exhibition has really just been a kind of exploration of my point of view on a number of kind of social or political issues that have happened, and approaching it through a series of paintings that all have superheroes as the protagonists, and they're also all quite either suggestive or explicit or provocative. There's two things going on there. One is the familiarity of a superhero. You know, the audience is already familiar with it, and whatever the political comment is, and a superhero in the character. And then I also do stuff that's very explicit, because I guess one of the observations about myself was like, why did I not stop and look? Why did I not pay attention? How did all this creep up on me without me really thinking about it? I do work that some people would describe as explicit. I prefer to describe it as provocative, or certainly makes you pay attention.
I love how you describe, because this is a podcast, obviously you can't see the art, and we'll try to get some placed up on social media and stuff like that for everyone to see, because it's fantastic art and it is very different in a good way. But I like how you did explain it with the whole old building. Someone's come along, put a poster up for Elton John, for instance, Diesel, another band, and then a graffiti artist has come over the top of it and done their tag. That brilliant way of describing it, because it is just like that. And it is pretty amazing. But also you've managed to pull in the LGBTIQ plus into your art as well. So not only are you living your dream as an artist, but you're also connecting back with the community, which is pretty amazing in itself.
The great thing about it is that each work that I do spend a long time kind of researching kind of the facts behind the story or I'm wanting to cover. And so it's been great for my own education. I think when I became an artist, I knew I wanted to be, for whatever word, a queer artist. I knew my queer point of view would be the leading point of view in whatever it is that I'm doing. So it's very important that I try and cover topics that are, relevant and important to the queer community, even if it means sometimes some audiences don't get it or they don't understand the significance. For me, having that representation is really, really important. Just from the point of view of creating conversation and talking about stuff. I mentioned earlier, like when I was young and mouthy queer kids, it was a very the time. And one of the things that I was kind of drawn to was the work by like people like ACT UP and Outrage, who would use provocative and in-your-face direct action to bring to people's attention, issues around, particularly then it was about gay men dying of AIDS. But there was also an even more kind of subversive workers collective. It was an art collective called Homocult back in the early 90s, and they produced artwork in line with kind of the politics of Outrage and ACT UP. And I think it must have had a really lasting impression on me, because that's kind of, when I do work, I want it to be a bit of a kind of slap in the face, but then now I've got your attention, look into it, look at the layers, look at what's going on. You don't have to agree with my point of view, but at least have a point of view, because it's reminding me that I didn't have a point of view for too long. And in the time that we face now, it's very important that we have a point of view. It's very important that we educate ourselves. It's very important that we speak up. So that's what I'm trying to do with the work.
And that's what I also love about it too. It's not only great art, but you have got that bottom line there of there's something that you want to tell the rest of the world. And by looking at it and going a little bit deeper than the acrylic art on the front page, you start getting the story that's behind it.
Yeah, thanks. The exhibition that I'm doing next week is actually my first public exhibition. I've shown work previously to the public, but when I had a private exhibition back in April, gosh, it seemed like only yesterday, but it was nearly a year ago. I had it for family and friends, and it was really to just see the reaction and see, is this something I should pursue? And I didn't want to talk about the work. I didn't want to explain it. I just wanted people to come look at it, what have you. But friends persuaded me to do a little kind of 5-minute talk and just explain where I'm coming from. And I realized that, people want to know the story. They do want to know the narrative, why people do want to know, and they want to discuss, and they want to have a point of view. And that's been really a real highlight for me in terms of people's reaction to my work.
It's a real conversation starter. So what's been the reaction with the LGBTI community in general? Were you going to get the attention of a lot of males from the community just by walking by the art? They're going to stop because guys are going to be guys. So what has been some of the reaction you've had?
Well, quite honestly, we're going to find out, because I haven't actually shown any of the work to anybody within the community. Normally, they'll do some group showings, or they'll show a couple of pieces, or I set myself a challenge nearly 3 years ago that I wanted to have an exhibition at World Pride. Now, fortunately, World Pride got put back a year because I wasn't organised last year. I'm introducing my work as a full show. There'll be, I think, 20 pieces, 20 paintings at the show. And I'm excited. I'm really excited to see how the community is going to react. And I'll get my first taste of that on Sunday, because I'm doing an art installation at Fair Days. I'm promoting the exhibition. I don't know, and I can't wait to find out, would be the simple answer.
Wow, so that's pretty exciting, and also very nervous, I should imagine. Anyone who's creative putting their stuff out into the universe, you hold your breath there for a minute and you think, well, what are people going to think?
Absolutely, it's terrifying. And when you decide to do controversial topics, you can sometimes fall down the rabbit hole of overthinking or anticipating reaction. And as soon as you start to do that, it completely taints the process and what you're trying to achieve. So I've very much cocooned myself, isolated myself away from points of view, so that the stuff that I'm producing is what I wanted to say about that topic. And now it's time for people to react and tell me what they think. And for me, I'm very pragmatic. You like it, you don't like it, it's fine. It's certainly not a popularity contest. I just want to know what people think. So Sexpo was something that I did purely to kind of dip my toe in the water, and also it was the commercial launch of my website. And I was overwhelmed at how positive the reaction at Sexpo was, because it wasn't who I considered to be my kind of core audience. And, a lot of people were extremely enthusiastic and encouraging. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, to get the same warm welcome at Fair Day, and then Pride Amplified through World Pride.
I think you will, because it is great art. So no matter who's going to be looking at it, I think, people who appreciate art and appreciate a story behind the art are going to definitely like it, that's for sure. In World Pride, tell us a little bit more about the show, where it's at.
It's going to be shown at a lovely space, Waterloo Redfern. It's Cope Street Gallery. Cope Street is in Waterloo. It's actually not far from the Bearded Tit, if anybody knows that drinking establishment. And it runs from the 23rd, Thursday, the 23rd of February, the opening night, 6 till 9. Anybody can come to the opening night. I would definitely encourage you to come. There'll be a glass of wine or a beer or what have you, and that's where I will be doing a talk or a presenting of the work. And then the exhibition will run for 3 further days, for the Friday, the Saturday and the Sunday, from 12 until 6. And that's open to general public. I decided to go with the first week of World Pride rather than the second. I don't want to try and compete against all the big, huge events. So it might be a little bit early, but hopefully the first week is when people don't have many engagements booked in. And if you do have some spare time, I would love to see people come down and support me.
And it's definitely worth the time to go down and have a look at this great art, and we'll make sure we put all the details in the show notes, so it'll make it easy for everyone to find. Now, if you could go back to your childhood, do you think you would have thought you'd be where you are today?
Absolutely not. I think if you asked me 4 years ago, would I be where I am today? No. I mean, I think sometimes we have a very clear and safe point of view about what our future looks like. And it's a paradigm that we absolutely believe in, and it's something that we would staunchly defend saying, no, I genuinely thought that I would be a career guy up until I retired, and that to career change and to basically kind of expose myself, for want of a better word, in terms of my thoughts and my feelings through my art, I would have said no chance. It's been a really interesting journey. There was a lot of, like I said, there was a lot of shame I had to get over, because when you say to people essentially you're dropping out to become an artist, that carries with it a lot of shame for the wrong reasons, I stress. Fortunately, I'm through that and I'm on the other side, and I have to say it's the best thing I've ever done. To have the gift or the privilege of reconnecting with yourself, it's pretty special, and I definitely feel blessed. And I certainly wouldn't change it. But no, I didn't think that I would be making the choice to become a full-time artist at this age, and everything that goes with that.
And do you think people who in corporate careers, when someone says they're going to do something different, like being an artist or something that's very creative, do you think the people who look at it and look down at it are more jealous than... I
think there's far fewer people look down on it than I thought there was, firstly. I think that's really important to stress. I think the uncomfortableness I had was largely self-imposed. Most people were genuinely quite supportive. And the people that are quite dismissive are either people who don't understand how important art is to me. But generally speaking, I think people maybe have a bit more envy rather than jealousy, because I've been surprised I'm now producing work. And many people are saying, oh my God, you're so brave. I can't believe that you've done it. I don't think it's necessarily brave, but I do think that I can understand people being in comfort zones and not wanting to take that leap of faith and change. But it's certain for me personally, being able to reconnect with who I am and what I'm about, and being all happier with the person I am, has been worth all the hard work and all the doubts and all the worries. It's definitely been worth it.
If you could go back and tell your younger self anything, what would it be?
Don't think that you know it all, and don't think that you've got it sorted, and just be open to opportunity. And I think also the thing, be less hard on yourself. You know, like the stuff you worry about and stuff you stress about, no one really cares. So you need to stop caring as much.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Paul, thank you so much for coming on LGBTI Conversations today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you at the exhibition.
You sure will.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
If you love listening to LGBTI Conversations, make sure to follow. This will help other people find us much easier, and also make sure that you never miss out on an episode. Thanks for listening to LGBTI Conversations with me, Anthony Doik.